This is Chasing the Horizon, a podcast by, for, and about motorcyclists, brought to you by Dunlop Motorcycle Tires and the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. Welcome to episode 30 of Chasing the Horizon, released on the 10th of September, 2018. I'm your host, Wes Fleming, and this time out, you're going to hear the rest of my discussion with Brian Case, co-founder of Motus Motorcycles. Regular listeners know that even though the podcast here is among the digital content offered by the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America, I don't spend a lot of time talking about BMW motorcycles. From the very beginning, I wanted the show to appeal to all riders, and that means talking about all kinds of motorcycles. Plus, we love all kinds of motorcycles. For this episode, though, I'm leading with some news about BMW. The biggest new news from the Motorrad Co. is the impending release of their newest boxer engine, a 1254cc beast pushing out a claimed 134 horsepower. What BMW has done in the past is introduce new engines and new technology with the GS and GS Adventure models, then spread those updates throughout the rest of the R-Bike lineup. This time, it looks like they're hitting the ground for the 2019 model year with the same engine for all of the bikes. One rumor about the new engine is that it will sport variable valve timing, a technology that has been found in cars for a while. Porsche did some experiments with VVT back in the 1950s, but Alfa Romeo was the first to put a VVT system into a production vehicle. The major Japanese car makers made it commonplace in the late 1980s and early 90s, and it's been going strong ever since. I don't know if BMW is going to use cam phasing VVT or not, but one thing this could well signal is a move away from regular valve clearance adjustments for BMW owners. Many VVT systems rely on hydraulic valve lifters, so that would eliminate a common pain point for riders who do their own maintenance. It's probably a good time for BMW to update the water-cooled power plant for the R-Bikes, especially since for the first time in a long time, the R1200 GS is not the best-selling motorcycle in Europe. In the first half of 2018, that distinction went to Honda's XADV scooter. Well, Honda doesn't call it a scooter, they call it a crossover adventure bike. It's kind of big for a scooter too, with a 750cc engine, but it doesn't have foot pegs, so I'm not really sure we can call it a motorcycle. At any rate, Honda sold over 20,000 of them in Europe in the first half of 2018, just edging out BMW's R1200 GS. Check out the show notes on the website at chasingthehorizon.us to get links to the photos of the XADV. The other bit of news from the BMW camp is about their sport bike, the S1000RR. It's been a while since that bike got a big update, and the changes for the 2019 model include eliminating the iconic, distinctive, asymmetric headlights. I'm kind of sad to see these go, but I completely understand why BMW went to a more traditional setup there. At any rate, details are a little sketchy on the bike, but major outlets are talking about horsepower ratings above 200, which is mind-boggling in a production bike that anybody can walk into a dealership and buy. The swing arm brace moves from over to under, which is typical on race bikes, but not so much on street bikes due to how the exhaust pipes usually flow from front to back. It's getting to be motorcycle trade show season, so it's likely we'll see updated and new models from BMW and all of the other major manufacturers at one show in the near future or another. Here in the USA, we're looking at the AIM Expo in Las Vegas in mid-October. Just before that is Intermot, the show in Cologne, Germany. EICMA takes place in early November in Milan, Italy, and there's also the SEMA Motor Show in China in about 2 weeks. That's a trade show sure to grow in importance in the next decade as manufacturers focus more heavily on Asian markets. Since Intermot is first, that's where we'll likely see a bunch of new model announcements, so be on the lookout for news around that show the first week of October. Hot on the heels of the announcement that the partnership between Harley-Davidson and electric motorcycle builder Alta Motors ended just 6 months after it began, came the news this week that Harley is opening a research and development center in Silicon Valley, otherwise known as the San Francisco Bay Area. The new facility is expected to be up and running by the end of 2018, and one of Harley's engineers said they're looking to tap the talent of Silicon Valley, not to mention the, quote, entrepreneurial, agile, nimble culture, unquote. The word entrepreneurial is very difficult to spell and even more difficult to say. Anyway, since Harley's Livewire electric motorcycle is already likely tooled up for production, this R&D center is probably going to be dedicated to the future of Harley-Davidson electric vehicles, some of which the Motor Co. teased in their July announcement cycle that included a number of gas-powered bikes, like the Street Fighter and the adventure bike, the Pan America. Reports indicate the EV R&D center will have about 25 employees spread across mechanical, electrical, and software engineering disciplines. So if you're one of those kind of people, start polishing up your resume and keep an eye out for their hiring announcements. Moving from one American cruiser builder with an interesting future to the other American cruiser builder with an interesting future, Indian Motorcycles released details about their 2019 lineup this week. And if you're on Facebook, you'd think the photos of the new Chieftains were one of the signs of the apocalypse. It's been a long time since I've seen so many people so up in arms about the design of a motorcycle. Without descending too far into the fray, it's apparent that Indian isn't resting on its laurels, and now that it's out of the infancy of its resurrected existence, they're starting to make some changes to their retro-styled cruiser line. In addition to the Chieftain Classic, which looks like the Chieftain Indian has been building since 2014, they're promoting the redesign of the line that includes an updated fairing, new wheels, altered fender designs, and custom paint jobs straight from the factory. One of the models, the Dark Horse version, features a blacked-out design, while the Limited covers the high end of the model's spectrum. Indian updated a number of its other offerings, including the Scout line, the Roadmaster, Springfield, and the Chief. It's what lies beyond the cosmetics that people should be talking about, if you ask me, because that's where Indian is continuing to advance. Since their original release, riders have complained about the heat generated by the rear cylinder of the V-twin engine at a standstill. Indian has addressed this issue by bringing in something called rear cylinder deactivation, which has been a feature on Harleys for a while, and that shuts off the rear cylinder when the bike is idling. They've also brought in multiple ride modes to take advantage of the throttle-by-wire system that's becoming pervasive across the entire motorcycle industry. Now, without getting too deeply involved in editorializing, it bothers me when I see riders trashing each other simply for their taste in bikes. Good-natured ribbing is one thing, but actually being insulting is another. It also bothers me when I see riders trashing manufacturers so aggressively. We all have to remember that we are already in. Most of the people listening to this show are already riding motorcycles. The manufacturers don't need to capture us. They've already got us. In order to secure their futures, they've got to attract new riders. Not just to bring new riders to their brand, but to bring in new riders, period. They have to capture new dollars, yen, euros, and rupees. With the way the motorcycle industry is going, that's not going to happen if they keep relying on the same old methods, the same old designs, the same old technology. That is exactly why Harley is putting out an adventure bike. It's exactly why Indian is responding to its fans with the FTR 1200. It's why Honda made the Goldwing lighter. It's why BMW started making a superbike. All of these companies are struggling to grow, and the best thing we as motorcyclists can do is support them, not by being uncritical, but by not being ridiculous and petty. Remember what Robert Pandya said way back in episode 15. We are all in this together. The BMW MOA Foundation has a new initiative aimed at keeping the roads safe for all of us. Over 88,000 motorcyclists are injured in crashes every year, and in 2016, over 5,200 people died in motorcycle crashes. Over 60% of the crashes were collisions between a motorcycle and some other vehicle. This situation led the MOA Foundation to create a new safety initiative called Built for All of Us. The objective is simple: to deploy enough awareness resources wherever riders gather to make a difference. Whether it's yard signs, billboards, or press coverage in local markets, resources provided by the MOA Foundation can raise awareness and keep riders out of the casualty statistics. Find out what you can do to raise awareness and maybe even win a classic BMW motorcycle by visiting the Foundation's website at bmwmoaf.org. So what are some of the applications that people have used your V4 for up to this point?
So let's see, boats, dune buggies. A couple different boats. We got a jet boat. We've got inboard, outboard type boats. Anyone in the marine industry that needs what's called a power head, right? So they've got a drive unit off the back of their boat, and they need to power that drive unit with an engine. We're looking at those markets now, and we're working with a number of hull makers on that. So it was just an opportunity. It's like, wait a minute, these things need engines to power them still.
Yes, they do.
So we are adapting our little V4 to power boats. It's a great use for it, and it's a tremendous duty cycle on an engine. Let me tell you that it is a completely different duty cycle between a motorcycle and a boat. So think of any time you've ever been in a boat, where are you at on throttle position?
Wide open.
You're either idling.
WFO.
You're either idling or WFO. Exactly right. So think of how many times you do that on a motorcycle.
Yeah, not quite as much.
Right. So it's a completely different duty cycle. So we're really we're learning about our engine in a way we never thought we'd have to learn about it. Right. So it is unbelievable. I'm really proud of how far we've come in designing and making this little engine what it is today. Yes, it's in a motorcycle that you can buy in dealers all across the country, but it's going into these other things that are opening up the floodgates on all these other really cool applications that are putting it to the test. And I think what it's going to have at the end is like all of these different segments, right? And it's in bikes and boats and 4x4 trucks, climbing mountains, and all of that goes under how bulletproof this little power plant is. So really excited about that, and some things that are coming down the line here within the next year that are going to be really exciting applications for other non-motorcycle uses.
Yeah. And I know from previous experience with discussions like this, I'm not even going to ask you what those are because I know you probably can't talk about them.
I can't talk about it.
Exactly. But I think a question that I can ask you that you can answer is, how many dealers do you guys have right now? Do you know that, or close off the top of your head?
Lee knows the exact number, but there's 25, 30
or so across the country. So how do you go about developing a dealer network, which is really, obviously you want to have a place where people can go and look at the motorcycle, sit on the motorcycle, buy the motorcycle. But really when you set up a dealer network, what you're doing is you're setting up a rider support network, right? So that people can get their bikes serviced, so that they can, be part of a community, which, it's really kind of amusing that for all the lonerness that you see in motorcycle riders, we really want to be part of a community. Most of us, I would say, we want to be around other motorcycle riders. We just kind of do that. So in that, I think dealerships have a big part to play in that. And maybe that's a better question for Lee, but you're in front of me, so I'm going to ask you, how do you kind of go about cultivating that dealer network?
Well, we are doing that now. We've a lot of these events that we do, and we go out and we are meeting our customers face to face and seeing that we've created this little thing by our own doing. It's amazing. It's beyond the machine anymore. We're actually creating these life experiences for these people, and they're sharing stories of what they did on their Motus and how they accessorized it or what trip they took, or and when I look back, it's like, it's not about the design of the bike or anything I did on a sketch pad. It's that experience we've given these people that I can't even put to words. Is amazing, and that all happens at the dealer level. That's our outreach, and being as small of a brand as we are, we have to kind of select our dealers very carefully, enthusiast type dealerships, places like you named, like that are just, it's like a social gathering that people just go and hang out on Saturday because they like being around other riders. Our brand is not the type of brand that can be, the bike just kind of pushed into a corner and forgotten about. It's intrinsically tied to the rider group, and people swapping stories about their experience on that bike is everything to us.
Yeah. So is there a particular part of the country where you guys, not necessarily on purpose, but where you see a concentration of dealers, like east of the Mississippi, west of the Mississippi? We walked past a map, but I didn't have a chance to look at it closely.
Yeah, and there's probably, it's not based on, anything about where that the interest level is. It's really more of like hand selecting the right dealers who are going to support us the best, and how that worked out geographically, I don't know, but it is spread out. We've got them in Tampa all the way to Seattle. So
if you live near a relatively large city, chances are there's either a Motus dealer there now, or there probably will be in the next few years.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, they're not going to be on every corner for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So
part of the appeal is that they're not on every corner.
So we do have Lee's working on our 2019 plan. Dealer growth, and it is fairly aggressive for a company our size to grow that network to beyond 75, 100 dealers, and within a few years. And that's a nice size for us. But again, even at that, even once there's 75 to 100 dealers, they're still not going to be on every corner.
Right.
As we grow, we get more selective and placing them now with some feedback of where our customers are and where they're traveling. But in the beginning, it was a lot of just finding good businesses to be involved with.
Right, and like you were saying, enthusiast operations. I know one of the one of the dealerships that you got involved with early on was Batley up in Maryland, and the former owner of Batley is this guy Devin Batley, who is just absolutely crazy about motorcycles. He loves all sorts of motorcycles.
Yeah, Devin's a good guy.
And his mouth was the first one I ever heard the word Motus come out of, and he was a big champion for you guys in the early stages. Now, unfortunately, he sold his business and more or less retired, but that's when I kind of started paying attention to Motus, and then of course he started showing up in magazines, and people on the internet started talking about you.
That's probably not a coincidence. Devin's a great guy, and he discovered Eric Buell early on. So I mean, he had this knack, and we knew of him in the industry that he had this ability to kind of see what was going to be next, and he wanted it, and he drove that. He's I want Motus to be in here, and he kind of championed it, and it was helpful for us, and
So we've spent a good bit of time talking about how Motus came about, how you got involved with motorcycles. I want to talk a little bit about the technical aspects of the motorcycle, because I've never really had the opportunity to sit and pick somebody's brain on why does your frame look like it does? Why does your swing arm look like it does? There's all these different ideas and options and things that you could do to make your motorcycle. So let's start with the frame. Yeah. You have even though the design of it is kind of avant-garde, you have a tubular, frame that is relatively traditional in concept, if not a little untraditional in actual execution. So what are the characteristics of that tubular frame that drew you to it and led you to kind of start putting your engines in those?
Yeah. So you're exactly right. It's a a steel trellis frame, and it is it's a common way to make a space frame. So when you look about like a startup manufacturer, everything that became an element of the bike was a series of design choices, right? So kind of like a design tree of choices and what we were going to do and tool and what it's going to cost and how can it look. So you blend all that together, and it's kind of like all roads pointed to a steel tube frame. It's been used in other places, so we knew it was proven and it's reliable, and it's relatively inexpensive to tool up. It's not like doing a vacuum pressure die casting. We'd be into millions of dollars in tooling, and all we had to have is a frame at that point. So we had to kind of look at the entire motorcycle as a whole from scratch, right? So we're not an existing manufacturer at this point in 2008. We don't have legacy tooling to build upon or a line. We don't even have a shop at that point. So when it comes down to specifically a chassis direction, it was heavily influenced by one of our partners now, which is a group called Pratt & Miller Engineering out of Detroit. So Pratt & Miller is relatively large engineering services group, and they do all kinds of things from automotive racing for GM and IndyCar and NASCAR, and then of course they do all these military funded projects, top secret stuff, really advanced high level engineering programs. We go to them, and a tube frame, tube trellis style space frame is right in their wheelhouse. It's what they do every day. They make chassis, namely for car racing. So a lot of automotive racing begins at a tube frame chassis. So it is well understood form of structural chassis engineering. So that's why we did it.
So at that point, you're not reinventing the frame, but you're adapting proven technology that is used under very high stress situations, auto racing, and you're changing the size, changing the length, changing the stress points, changing a number of factors, but you're still, in effect, leveraging proven technology for your purpose.
That's right. It was, again, it's like looking at the entire forest, this entire motorcycle, and deciding, what battles we wanted to, we pick and choose everything on this thing, engine. And it always came back to engine. We're going to make our own engine, right? So it's like that is, if you had buckets of, dollars and energy and like what we were going to put into this thing, it always came back to engine. This is what needs to be perfect, and let's not go reinvent the wheel on chassis yet, right? So tube frame steel, bulletproof, reliable. We stressed the thing in the computer for 8 months at Pratt & Miller. I mean, they literally put it through the test in computer before we ever made one. And then we make the first one 7 days later, and I start doing the clay on it, and that's our chassis, and it has been bulletproof ever since.
So since the beginning of that first frame design, you haven't really changed the frame all that much.
Not at all. Yeah, we've other than points and tabs and things like mounting bodywork on, you add to it, but the structural architecture of that frame, developed in conjunction with Pratt & Miller, has led us down this path, and it is such a bulletproof part of the entire thing. We're very proud of it, and how it's handled everything that we've seen thrown at it and tossed, and it's pretty good feeling.
Well, and that's one of the great things about selling your bikes is you can think of this and you can test for this, but as soon as you sell it to somebody else, they're going to do something on it that you never predicted.
Hands down, that happens all the time. We just cannot think of every use of how it's going to be, and so it's It's a little overbuilt, but that's, overbuilt is safe.
Yeah, overbuilt is going to fail less on its own. You might have somebody that can figure out a way to overcome the built-in stability, but it's not going to happen on its own.
Sure.
So the style of frame, the type of frame extends onto your swing arm.
Sure.
There's tons of different types of swing arms: single-sided, double-sided, aluminum, steel, et cetera, et cetera. So how did your frame concepts translate back to the swing arm as well? I guess what I'm asking is, what were you trying to accomplish with the swing arm that lended itself to those steel tubes?
Yeah, I mean, I looked at some other styles of swing arm and final drive relationship. I started with single-sided arm, my clay model back in 2008 and 2009, started with single-sided, but these were all, again, on the wall board of design projects and what to do and what not to do. I quickly saw as a single-sided arm was its own thing, its own challenge in itself, and how to do the hub and how to make it reliable, and if it was a chain final versus a shaft drive, and all those decisions were made, and what it became was something that complements, I think, very well with the mainframe in being a trellis style swing arm as well. And it's a twin spar trellis swing arm, mainly for strength and rigidity. And in my view, a single-sided swing arm came about really from racing, inspired by racing roots and being able to change a wheel off the side quickly.
Yeah.
Was that important for Motus as a street bike? Maybe not. So it didn't matter so much for me. But a single versus twin spar, I felt like twin spar was the safest and easiest approach for us, given the simpler hub arrangement. You're talking about a couple of bearings and an axle. Now, in that, I did design the eccentric axle adjusters, the chain adjusters, kind of inspired by old, racing roots.
Plus, they just look
Bamotas cool. And Airmakis, and of course Kawasaki. That eccentric hub, I've always loved that for some reason. So
it's beautiful.
It's like one moving part.
Right.
So there's different ways to skin the cat on that, and nothing. And this kind of goes with the front end challenge too. Is like. And I think it was actually Kevin Cameron that told me that one time. He said somebody was talking to him about what's called in the industry is like funny front ends, right? Like different, the Hosek and
that Yamaha,
the Telelever, the GTS, all these funny front ends, right? So, and I of course had experience at Confederate with a funny carbon fiber front end, right? Yeah. So girder style. So that was a very conscious decision for me at Motus, was not to try to reinvent the wheel just yet on the front end. A telescopic fork has not been obsoleted yet.
Right.
And that was a conversation I had with Kevin Cameron. It's like, it's still pretty good. They're still using them in racing.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, and you guys went with the upside down, the so-called upside down. A fork, it's a fork. It has the slider and the
state of the art.
The tube. Yeah. But you went with the upside down design.
It says sport bike, right?
Right.
It's a super bike level front end. It's Olden. So I mean, we're saying
not messing around.
Right. We're drawing a line in the sand. This is a super bike front end here. You'll be fine. So yeah.
So you mentioned the chain, but to get to the chain, I want to start at the other end with the engine.
Yeah.
So you kind of took this American V8 concept, cut it in half so that it would physically fit in a motorcycle. I know somebody did a V8, car-sized engine in a motorcycle, but it's ridiculous looking. So you sized it, you scaled it, you powered it for a motorcycle. Because it's a car concept, not a car engine, but you started there, it lends itself to dry clutch and drive shaft. And yet your bike has a wet clutch and a chain final drive.
Right.
So how do you get from this would have been easy-ish nothing is 100% easy on a motorcycle, to this is what hits the streets?
Well, you say easy, but when we looked into it, things are not always what they seem. And the chain final is easy. It's ubiquitous. It's known. It's the standard in racing, right? Yeah, sport bikes all have chain drives.
Right.
So by saying chain final, we're saying this is sporty, right? So we're saying this is a sport type layout. So the whole powertrain is kind of like a hybrid. It's got that longitudinal automotive inspired engine layout coupled to a very conventional wet plate multi-clutch on the side of the bike with a chain final. So it's kind of a conventional, well understood layout from a sport bike standpoint. And I think that is why we traditionally say, it's a capital S sport touring.
Right.
Because it is a very sporty geometry. We're not saying it's a race replica and you should go competitive on a racetrack with it, but it is just by looking at the geometry, it's very capable. If you wanted to put clip-ons on it, it's very similar geometry to race bikes in that regard. So it is a capable machine by some of those choices we make. So now in doing that, you're kind of constrained, right? I like working around constraints because you're using a 17-inch rim. You're using a 41-tooth sprocket. Well, now your axle height is set, right? Mm-hmm. Your chain line is set. The chain pull is all set and locked where that output shaft has to be in the chassis to make it all work. So that drives the placement of all the shafts and the clutch and the transmission, and then I come back to the angle, and the angle of the engine is set forward at 15 degrees as kind of a dual prong approach because it's more aggressive looking.
It is, yeah.
Which is a pet peeve of mine, how engines have traditionally in longitudinal layouts slanted back over time. For various reasons I don't fully understand, but I was kind of railing against that by deliberately pushing it forward 15 degrees. So it gives it that, the Motus look of it driving forward. And that lended itself to the exhaust design. So What am I going to do with the exhaust now? We've got these cylinder heads sticking out in the wind. What can I do there? And that kind of brought the whole thing home in creating this heart and this cage around the heart, and the rib cage is the exhaust, and it's very symmetrical, balanced, and it sweeps back and it says this is a new kind of American bike. It doesn't look like an American bike that you're familiar with.
Yeah, it
so it's all
doesn't.
kind of important into the whole brand.
So, excuse me, from that perspective, clutches last a long time, but different people ride different ways, and sooner or later, you keep a bike long enough, you're going to have to put a clutch in it. So you understand that as a motorcycle rider, motorcycle owner, you've probably replaced a clutch or two in your lifetime, which kind of leads me into a maintenance angle. Was user maintenance something that you took into account, or was it just kind of something that lucked out? Clutch on the side is a lot easier to replace than clutch in the middle. Were you thinking about oil changes and tire changes and brake pad changes and clutch changes for the user as you were going along in this design process?
For sure, definitely. It's something that when we decided to go longitudinal and seeing all the other designs out there that are longitudinal and how you would do a clutch on that system, it did absolutely drive me crazy why that needs to be the case. And it's, I understand how it got to that point with automotive layouts and having a longitudinal engine in a vehicle and putting the flex plate and the flywheel and the clutch all there in the middle of the powertrain, but to me, that just didn't make sense for serviceability on a motorcycle, that we were going to build this brand around this and have a dealer network and service centers. And being able to get at things on our motorcycle was critical to our success and our growth as a brand. And it's something that we really like hearing about now as we grow and hearing owners like, oh, I worked on this, it was so easy to get to, I didn't have to pull all these things off, or I could do it myself, blah, blah, or the dealers are very happy that things are just readily accessible and easy to get to. So that definitely drove the layout very early on in engineering of like, where do we put the clutch? And turning that all sideways because we knew we wanted to do chain final, just conveniently packaged it right on the side. And there were many times back in engineering where we were wondering if it was the right thing to do and should we do it, and we pushed forward and we figured it all out. So
when it comes to you make some things here, you don't make other things here. Like you just mentioned, your suspension is Öhlins. How do you make that determination? Because what I'm thinking of specifically is Ural. I don't know if you're familiar with Urals, but 20 years ago, they made everything. They made everything in their factory. They made their own brake calipers. They made their own suspension parts. Wow. They made everything. Yeah. Now they buy brake calipers and they buy digital ignitions and they put them on their bikes. Yeah. So obviously there's going to be business considerations, but one of the things that I'm getting from you is that there is nothing on this bike that is incidental or not completely thought out. Every aspect, every component is there for a reason, with a reason.
Sure.
So you've obviously decided that, a commercially available suspension is what you're going to put on your bike. So how do you decide from that standpoint whether to make something or buy something for your bikes?
Well, a little bit of it is business decisions. If we can find it on the shelf somewhere and it fits with our brand image as a component, we'll source it that way. If we can't find it and we have to make it, then we go that route. The suspension, I think it's from a functionality standpoint, like I said, is a telescopic fork upside down. It's not it's not obsoleted yet. There are, that I'm aware of, there's no American manufacturers making telescopic forks. Öhlins has a great brand. They're known internationally. We thought that's an easy one. Check it off the list, right? Öhlins has performed outstanding for us. So brakes, we're using Brembo brakes. We're not going to make our own brake caliper that's any better than a Brembo, right? So it all goes back to like pick and choose your battles. What are we going to do to grow this brand, and what are we going to pride ourselves on? And it always came back to the engine, which is a huge part of it, right? If we get that right, all these other things will fall into place. And will we make our own caliper someday? I don't know, but the Brembos are great for us, and it's a premium bike, right? So you kind of see across the industry, you kind of see these things grouped together, right, on a lot of machines. You see Brembo with Öhlins and a Kropovich and things like that. So a Magura master cylinder. So I think it makes sense to our buyers too when they see these things together, and it's kind of proven performance, right? So it'd be a much steeper battle if we had to try to, explain to people why we're making our own calipers. Like it's just not something we want to pride ourselves on right now. So.
Well, and plus that, using, in this example, using a Brembo caliper or an Öhlins rear shock, if something goes wrong, if they need a new set of brake pads and they can't get to their Motus dealer,
just off the shelf stuff,
you can absolutely call Motus and say, hey, what's the part number on these brake pads, and you can get them from nearly any motorcycle dealer.
Any one of our dealers, they can get parts very fast, and that's the beauty of one. It's a U.S. This is a domestic market we're talking about. We're servicing the U.S. only, and all
so
our
you're not
dealers,
selling them overseas at all.
We're not international yet. So we have the ability to service our network very fast. So everything is here on the shelf in Birmingham, and if it's not, we can get it quickly and get it to our dealers. But it's a lot of the things that we source are common, readily available parts, and all of those went into those decisions. Let's not source something that's only unique to us and like the charging system, for instance. It's an automotive-based alternator, that runs off of our primary shaft, and it's an off-the-shelf, easy, very easy for us to get. There's an endless supply of them. We can get them to any dealer if we had to. So yeah.
So I want to ask you one more kind of technical question about the engine. As before we started talking, you kind of took me on a little tour of the shop here, and when we were looking at the undersides of the cylinder heads, or I guess it was I don't know which side it is because I'm not that much of an expert. One of the things I noticed is that the valve sizes, the holes for the valves are different sizes. So I know very little about valve design or combustion chambers. Why would you do that? Not necessarily why does Motus do that, but why would you in general do that?
Intake and exhaust. So intake is the much bigger valve. You want as much air as you can get into that cylinder. So the exhaust doesn't need to be that big, but we spent a lot of time with our engineers working back from the performance and the torque and the horsepower we wanted this engine to have. So once we decided on V4 format, we backed into the displacement of 1650 and the bore and stroke to achieve that by the power and the torque that we wanted. So we wanted this bottom end, very aggressive, awesome American torque, seat of the pants feel. So that chamber design, this 2-valve, very American V8 derived architecture is driven by that. So it's a massive intake valve for the size engine it is. And then the valves are canted and splayed from each other, which optimizes flow even more in a 2-valve. So if you look at like a cross flow chamber with the parallel valves, that's kind of the standard. That's the way you put 2 valves in there.
And that's not at all what yours look like.
Ours is just like another notch. It's like we went to 11 on it. Okay, so
that reference I get.
Yes. So because this, we were, our engineers. It's just kind of like a little bit of engineering flexing, right? It's like let's just try this and see if we can improve it a little bit more, and they're doing it in racing and optimizing flow around the valve, 360 degrees to get as much flow through there as possible, and that's what we were able to pull off. And it's dynamite engine in its base trim, and we're talking. As cast, we don't like port and polish our heads or do any of that stuff. We're a factory. We make a standard issue Motus powertrain. We have customers already. There's people out there building hot rodding Motus engines, and we're going to see all kinds of stuff coming up. But it's like a platform, right? You could do anything with it, and there's definitely a lot of untapped power to unleash.
I noticed that it is a 2-valve design when it seems like every motorcycle engine in the world is a 4-valve.
It depends on what it is. If it's overhead cam, or dual overhead cam, they're typically 4 valves. You get as many little valves into that chamber as possible. But what we looked at was 2-valve architecture and how that hasn't been obsoleted yet, and why is it still good, and who else uses it. And you look at like GM and Corvette still going around a track, winning races and going to Le Mans, and that's still 2-valve pushrod architecture. Okay. Works really good, bulletproof, reliable, produces a lot of torque. So yeah,
once again, not reinventing but improving and motorcycling.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that word came out right, but you know what I mean.
Well, even beyond motorcycling, we're seeing this thing going into off-road and UTVs and all kinds of things. We had a customer that repowered his 3-wheeler. So, and this is a new thing. We're having Motus owners who have bought our motorcycle and have something else in their garage. They want to repower with a crate engine.
Yeah.
We didn't see that coming.
No.
But that's pretty cool. So he's got a 3-wheeler now with a sequential shifter and a Motus engine, and I've driven it, and it was exhilarating to be able to be in a steering wheel and sequentially shift a Motus before was awesome.
Yeah. And actually, I thought about one more thing that I wanted to ask you. I apologize, but you've got, so obviously the people listening to this episode can't see this, but we're sitting in the conference room in the front of Motus HQ, and you've got a little, I don't want to say a showroom because there are desks and people are working, but you got a nice big poster of a couple of bikes at Bonneville, and you've got one of your early prototypes in here. And you've got a customer's bike that's done. It's ready to go to the dealership to be delivered to the customer. And I took a good close look at it, and I noticed that there's a lot of little things on it that are adjustable. Yep. The handlebars are higher than I expected them to be for a bike that's that sporty, but they're reasonable, but they're also adjustable. I even noticed a little adjustable. The toe part of the shifter is adjustable fore and aft.
Sure, yeah.
So where do you come up with those ideas?
Little extra things, why not, while you're at it, design in, and I showed you my concept model, mm-hmm. right, where it's kind of the first human factor project of what the Motus layout was going to become, and being able to accommodate different size, body types and different age groups and all that. So while you're at it, at a clean sheet of paper, why not design in just a little bit of adjustability to fit a wider range of people? The seat has a nice amount of room front to rear, so different size riders with different arms length can kind of move around a little bit. Mm-hmm. To me, it was, and this goes back to a bigger picture kind of a thing of why do I like designing motorcycles, is because it's this collection of all these things that have to work together. Just like a machine, it's just like everything has to be in its place, and there's a specific place for it, and it has to all be balanced, right? Mm-hmm. Like literally balanced, or it'll fall over one way.
Right.
So there's a lot that goes into that, but I love that part of it. That it's, it all has to have a place like that.
So which one do you have at home?
Mine's sitting right there.
Oh, that's yours right there.
So the one in the photo.
At the MSTR.
Yeah, so we took a couple of bikes out, and this is 2014, okay. Right? So we were in...
the black one's in the other room.
Yeah. So, and we thought it was very important at that time. Now, and Lee will tell you a lot more about this because he's got a Bonneville background too, which was kind of cool. It's like, what can we do to really launch this thing? We're in 2014. We're wrapping up testing and validation. We're getting into EPA testing at that point. We're making a short run of bikes. We're not quite in full production yet. We're telling dealers that we're getting ready.
Yeah.
They can, kind of when they can expect their first bikes in 2015. So we're sitting there in 2014 with some pre-production bikes, and we're thinking, let's go to Bonneville. Let's go and get the production record, right? Because we're a production company. Right?
Sure.
So let's go get the bone stock production record for a pushrod 1650 class vehicle, right? We looked at the records and thought, well, what's in that class? You've got some Harleys and mm-hmm. some other, pushrod style engines that size, right? So, anything over like 90, 96, So we thought, okay, well, let's see. Let's record 132.
We ought to be
I think it was the record.
Like, that's nothing.
Yeah. So we thought this would be really cool, and it was just such a great trip because it was just a handful of us at the time, and we're going out to Bonneville, and reliving our childhood at the same time because
right.
It's Bonneville, and we're just kind of battling Mother Nature, and we go out and we get a couple records first time out, and then we rode the bikes home. Of course, I don't even know if we thought about it beforehand, but it was kind of like, well, we need to get home fast, and because we have families
and jobs.
Yeah, more so families, so wanting us home.
Right.
But so we just kind of like, well, let's just ride. Let's just go. We had, the chase vehicle. We left them behind. And we just start riding home. And we rode those 2 bikes sitting right there all the way home.
From Utah?
1,900 miles, 2,000 miles, straight from Bonneville to Birmingham. Full race trim. Still, I think we put the tags back on. We put the tags back on.
You don't want to get pulled over.
We had them taped up. We took the lights off for the record and everything. But I think that was a really cool part of the story, because we went out there thinking these 2 guys are going to set land speed records. We thought that was the story.
Right.
When in reality, we rode the things home.
Broke the records, then rode home.
We didn't put them in a trailer.
Right.
Like, it was ride these things across the country. And it was really cool.
Well, that's the touring part of sport touring. You got both aspects of it in on the same trip.
Yeah. Well, in reality, we don't have a lot of customers going out breaking land speed records. We have a much larger proportion that want to ride their bikes and go across
1,900 miles.
Yes, yeah. So it was
has anybody broken those records yet?
Nobody has broken our records at Bonneville, but I think we have a total of 7 records, I want to say, outside of the company.
Okay.
So these are Motus owners that have gone out and set their own records at various places, Texas Mile, Loring,
here, there,
East Coast.
and everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, they're going out and running these things.
Yeah.
I think you'll have to check. I think the record right now is 175 miles an hour.
Okay.
In a standing mile.
And what's a standing mile?
0, standing still.
So
to a mile as fast as you can go.
Right.
175. Now I know it's geared for a little bit more than that, but that was his first time out. So
you might not have had a full grip on the process.
Yeah. That's still moving pretty good though. 175 in a mile. So it's capable. It's a fast machine, but it's not unrideable, which is what I like about it. It's the nature of our V4 has this broad spectrum of usable range, and it can cruise all day. You can just set the cruise control and just like forget about it. Like, just cruise along at 3,500 RPM. You're doing 70. Just go across country. If you want to pass the truck in 6th gear,
you can.
It's like, it's just there. It's on tap. So it's got a very broad spectrum. That's what I love about it.
Well, listen, Brian, thanks for taking up so much of your day. I really appreciate it. It's been a real education listening to your story, the story of Motus, and especially getting to geek out a little bit on the technical details. I don't talk that kind of stuff with everybody, but I'm just fascinated because you've got this really impressive piece of motorcycle engineering, and a lot of it's visible. So it's easy to see the frame and the engine and all this stuff that's going on. So I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Chasing the Horizon is brought to you in Season 2 by Dunlop Motorcycle Tires. Motorcyclists the world over recognize the name Dunlop, and for good reason. With extensive global resources and a commitment to racing disciplines worldwide, Dunlop draws on a vast body of knowledge to develop innovative motorcycle tire technology. Much of this technology quickly makes its way to motorcycle riders, whether they ride on the track, street, or a weekend off-road adventure. Dunlop maintains extensive development and manufacturing capabilities in the U.S., focused on developing groundbreaking new products. Dunlop has been building tires using domestic and foreign materials in Buffalo, New York since 1920, and to this day is the largest manufacturer building motorcycle tires in the USA. Point your web browser to dunlopmotorcycletires.com to learn more about Dunlop's promotions, find the right tires for your bike, and use a searchable index of hundreds of Dunlop motorcycle tire dealers across North America. Please take some time to engage with us on the internet. Chasing the Horizon is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And of course, you can visit the website at chasingthehorizon.us for show notes and links for all the sponsors, news, and guests. There's a mailing list with exclusive content and giveaways open only to subscribers. You can sign up for that at tinyletter.com/chasingthehorizon. Thank you for coming back for the 30th episode of Chasing the Horizon. Episode 31 will feature Matt Chambers of Curtis Motorcycles and will be out on September 17th. Thanks for listening. We'll see you out there somewhere on the road or off it. Ride safe.